Hello there and welcome to the craft store and this watercolour painting lesson with me, Matthew Palmer. Today we're going to paint a beautiful flowing waterfall with a gorgeous sky, distant trees and a grassy banking. Let's get started. Let's go through the materials. We have a sheet of watercolour paper, a fairly small sheet of watercolour paper, which is stuck to a board with masking tape, a good quality masking tape, stuck to a piece of wood or a good firm piece of cardboard, ready for action. Down in the palette area, we have the three important colours. These are primary colours. We've got a blue. This one is natural blue, this one is natural orange, and this one is natural red. But any blue, orange and red will work perfectly fine for this. And we've got plenty of water here as well. We've got a brush here, which is a nice pointy number 6 brush. This particular one is a worker brush or a size 6 brush, beautiful for doing detail and those large washes too. So I've got some kitchen paper tucked away at the background and an optional knife. An optional sharp craft knife here as well is good for actually adding a few highlights to the water, but that's something that is not necessarily needed. We'll start off with another piece of masking tape, which we'll take the stickiness from by sticking it somewhere, like your fingers or somewhere. And imagine the paper can be divided up into thirds, 1, 2, 3, loosely a third of the way up. We're going to come down. Notice I'm holding one side of the tape, and then as it goes past halfway, try and get that line to go nice and straight. So it's from a straight line into a curve. That means we've given us a basic composition, the sky and trees here, the water and the landscape at the bottom. What we'll do to start with, folks, is we'll grab the brush and we'll make sure it's clean, and we'll get loads of water and we'll literally wet the top section of the paper, making sure the tape is stuck down. This watercolour paper is designed to hold water well. All watercolour paper is designed for two things, one for texture and two for holding water. So it's important to use a watercolour paper for this. Wet the paper at least twice, if not 3 times, depends how warm it is where you're working. There you go, that's had a good sort of 3 coats of water. Watch out for any water gathering at the bottom here. If it does, just kind of brush it away. And then let's paint in a beautiful sky. Down to the palette, what we'll do, clean the brush. The orange, we'll take the orange. There is no water in the palette, water on the brush, wriggle it around the orange and you get a beautiful vibrant colour. What a difference from the blob to the actual colour that you see in here. And a little bit does go quite a long way. Load up the brush, back to the picture, literally hold the brush quite loosely, lay it flat and twist away. See that very pale orange colour, very pale, very light. Literally twist your brush. The lighter the better for this. Bring it down from about halfway in the sky. See how the brush is flat to the paper? A little bit does go quite a long way. Feel free to make the colour a bit stronger if you want more of a sunset evening atmosphere. Beautiful. Clean the brush and then we'll go into the blue and do the same with the blue. We'll take the blue. You can't go wrong with this. Drag a little bit from the edge. Put as much water as you need. Back to the picture, same thing. Loosely held, flat to the picture and twist away. Look how you get that instant sky. Now what's interesting, when blue will mix with the orange, because the blue is a little bit stronger, it'll go a slight grey colour. So there's no issue with bringing a bit of that colour into the orange to get that sort of slightly grey cloud effect. But my advice to you is just loosely try and avoid. And there is your watercolour sky. Beautiful. Excellent. While the painting is a bit damp, let's crack on and put in the first part of the trees. If the bottom of your picture is dry, still do this, it works just as well, but we'll do it now while it's damp because it just gives a slightly soft or a feathered edge. So down to the palette, we're going to mix a bit of a dark green here. So much more paint being used. You can see there's much more orange there. Add the blue to this until you start to see a dark green appear. There you go. It's a bit like a sage or olive green. Now if you're using a yellow as opposed to an orange, you'll get a brighter green. What we'll do here is we'll do the same thing. We'll twist the same brush stroke look flat to the paper. Practice this, folks. Get a piece of scrap paper, wet it, and pop in some misty trees, working down, out of focus. Can you see that sort of rotation effect? It really works nice for distant trees. If I bring it forward to the light's not reflecting, you can really see that nice, beautiful, soft edge. That's because the paper was still a little bit damp. Let's make the colour stronger by adding more orange and more blue. So it's got more blue. You can see it's a deeper green at this point. Let's do the same, but start to introduce the kitchen paper, the paper towel at this point, because removing the excess colour just a little bit gives you more chance, or sorry, less chance of the paint going down the back of the tape. Not as though that's a big problem if it does do that. So I'm doing the same twist, but notice I'm holding the brush further down the shaft. So from here now to here, and it's giving me more control. And also notice that I'm leaning on the paper as well, the board. Now, most people would be working on a table or a lap here. Easels are more for display purposes and for demonstration, but notice that nice darker colour, beautiful. Tilt forward again, you can really see the light just catching those beautiful trees. Beautiful way of working. Let's add some more blue, so back down to the palette. And more blue, but this nice palette gives me plenty of space to work. So I can have more blue here, for example, while still keeping some of the other colour on the other side. And then back to the picture, and we'll do even smaller twists. Notice this is right next to the masking tape that I'm doing this. Because imagine a tree, as it gets darker towards the base, you're going to get shadows. And the more blue you add to that colour, the more towards the shadow you're going to get. Now, if you need to blend this in a little bit, wipe off the colour and then just encourage it to disappear. Beautiful. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's go darker again. Back down to the palette. So we've got this bluey colour and we've got the green here. We've not used the red yet. Let's take the tiniest bit of red and pop it over the top of that colour you've just mixed. Can you see it makes it go towards a grey, which is all important, grey being the shadow colour. So that's a mixture of the orange, the blue, so you've got green. Add red to green, you're going to get grey eventually. And we can twist even smaller. Look at these beautiful shadows. Look at this, really getting into these corners here. This is what it's all about, folks. The darkness on the underneath, really darkening down. Tilt it forward, you can see you've got layers to the trees. What's missing from the trees, of course, is a few leaves and some branches. We'll come to the branches later, but what we'll do is come back to the palette, and the green is here. There's the green. So that's the one that's the orange and the blue. Feel free to mix more if you need to. And I'm going to get spotty. We're going to get spotty, basically. The paper's pretty much dry. If it's a bit damp, it's okay. If it's really wet at this point, my advice to you would be to give it a bit of a blast with a dryer or something like that, but on a hairdryer or a craft heat gun. I'm just basically spotting. I'll put the kettle on, that'll do. But I'm spotting away here on the tops. And being less precise with the spots as I work down into the mass. It's about giving texture. It's about giving a nice bit of texture. You can do some on this side as well if you want to. Keep picking the colour up. Keep spotting the paint. Random. Try and be random. If you struggle to do random, swap hands. Or not, maybe. Try it. Give an interesting effect. So there we go, spotting away. Again, you can work on the edges. Beautiful. And we've got now trees, you know, we've got the shadows in the base of the trees, you've got the mass, you've got the leaves. It's coming together, folks. It's coming together. What we'll do now is we'll leave that alone, church bells, and we'll come back to that once it's dry, but we'll take off the masking tape, but that is a good time to give that a little bit of time to actually dry. Taking away the masking tape here leaves a clean edge. Now, if you had some paint seep down the back, and that does happen, I promise you it does happen, it'll get lost in the next stage, so you don't have to worry about it. The next stage, once this is dry, is all about painting in the grassy verge, the banking. Again, down to the palette here, we have the orange, mixing more green, but just want to make sure you've got plenty of colour here. There it is. Keep adding little spots of water. Always think to yourself, this is watercolour, so it needs water for it to work. That's a lovely green there. A nice kind of sage green. Having the orange in the sky gives that evening feel, so the green can be that little bit darker. Beautiful way of working. What we'll do here, folks, is we'll paint a line across with this green. Pretty much a straight line-ish. And then we'll do more straight lines. See, these are little steps, little straight steps. Where we're going to put the waterfall, you can decide. I think just here, a curve. So we've gone from a step into a curve. Then do some more horizontal lines. So what you've got there is the area of the grassy banking. We're going to fill this in. We're going to fill it in with the colour, working back. Keep picking up more colour. Just have a quick look at the palette. You can see that that paint's nice and juicy. It's got plenty of water with it there, look. It's important to get those colours right before you crack on with the picture. Wonderful job. You can't go wrong with this. You just fill it in. Painting by numbers, that's what this is like. Fill it in. And then as you get towards the brow of the hill, if you like, sort of here, leave a little bit of a white gap. And the reason for the white gap is because I want that to be lighter. I want it to stand out. How do you make it stand out? Simply clean your brush in the water pot. Give it a good rinse. Get a piece of kitchen paper and give it a couple of quick taps. No more than 2 taps because you need water on that brush. Any more than 2 taps and it will be too dry. Put the brush in the green and move it and blend it. Move it and blend it. You can really see how you can go right to the edge of the green. Give it a good old scribble. Give it a good old scribble and the colour starts to blend, bleed and soften and you can see you've got that slight lighter edge. If you can still see a bit of white at the back, clean the brush a second time, give it a couple of quick taps and then put the brush in there. Brill. Let's get down to the palette, shall we? Let's make this colour dark, a bit like we did previously with the trees. Let's put some more blue in it. So it goes like a teal or a petrol colour. Add a bit of the red and you'll see it goes more towards a grey. Don't be afraid to use grey in your pictures. So add blue and add a bit of red to the orange and you get grey. Grey is so important, folks. Look around the studio at the back of me. You can see all the shadows around, back of the easels, back of me, under my chin. Lots of shadows around. Shadows are grey, but they are so important. And mixing it from your primary colours is by far the best way, so have a good practice at mixing the grey. Back to the picture, using this brush, let's darken the edge. Let's darken the edge, but let's extend those lines up into the hill. Imagine you've got some shape. In your mind, imagine it goes straight and then up. Follow the up and the downs of this. Take it up like so. You can't go wrong. Put in shadows. Come down the waterfall here. Put some shadows up there. You need darkness in your lives. It's important. Let's also darken the bottom of the trees. While we're doing this, we can put some darker spots in. Look. The darker down there, the better. You can be as creative as you like with this darkness as well. If you want to make the trees have more separation, for example, you can darken. Imagine where that tree comes down. I can spot in some darkness where one tree meets another. Does that make sense? You can see that separation, tilt it forward, and you can really see that nice effect of the light and the dark working together. So it's adding shadows, always an important thing to do. And as a beginner to painting, it's not something that you'd necessarily think to do, but shadows are the thing that make the thing really pop and come to life. Down here, pop some shadows in as well. So basically, practice painting in the dark shadows at the back of those trees. Now, when you first put them on, they do look a bit odd. They look a bit weird. I'll be the first to admit that. And it kind of proves a point, and something I've been saying for years, teaching painting for all these years at workshops and holidays. You've got to finish your picture off. You've got to continue through with your painting. So try and see past these grey spots in your trees to the end, because everything changes, every step changes, every little really does help when it comes to painting. So it's something to always bear in mind. So I'm spotting from the base of the trees up into the sky, towards the sky in the trees. Well, then how do you make those grey spots that you've painted in along this edge here in the trees? How do you make them look more like shadows and less like just grey lines? What you do is you blend the paint in, okay? So I'm just making sure that I'm happy with the darkness on the edge, and I've got plenty of shadows and things in here. It's all important stuff. It's all important stuff. So what we'll do here is we'll come down to the palette and we'll take a nice light green. So we'll start again, actually, just here. Look, I'll put some orange there and I'll pop some blue. Keep adding the blue until you get the green come through. When we say light green, it simply means more water, like this. Okay, now here we're getting a bit more detailed. How do you get detail out of the brush? Rotate the brush through your fingers, practice this technique, draw it through the colour, and you get that beautiful point on that brush. It really does make quite a difference. A little tap on tissue as well would be quite useful at that point as well. Removing the excess from the brush gives you more control. Let's come back to the picture. Let's put some of these lighter green spots quite rapidly, because they look more natural. Don't be too precise with these. Spot away, dab, spot, and work just slightly above the grey. Keep jumping around the picture, not literally with your brush. I mean, feel free to jump around the picture if you want to. Keep spotting away, working up towards the trees. Can you see how those shadows are kind of blending in? Every brush stroke is a spot, it's a stipple. I'm not dragging the colour here, but I'm going right over to the edge. Let's do this in slow motion. So it's blending in the lines, blending, and you can really see each tree starting to look individual. Keep picking up more colour, keep adding more life to the trees. Keep working higher, keep spotting, keep dotting. You can't go wrong. Add texture, add leaf. Walk back a step, look at the thing from a distance, think to yourself, well, that shadow looks a bit harsh still, I'll add more spots to it. But I'm keeping the line on the left here and on the right there, and it's giving natural separation of trees, which is what it's all about. I'm also going to pop a few of these lines into the grassy banking as well, just following the direction. These aren't spots, these are more strokes. Brilliant. So I'm scribbling around the paper, and common question people ask me, this is dry, how do you reactivate colour? The tiniest bit of water on your brush and it's dead easy to reactivate colour. I'm trying to pinch a bit of grey from there. Can you see that little bit of grey from the corner? Just a touch if you've got a bit left. Again, it's just to make sure that we are very dark along the edge of the river and clean and dark all the way along the edge of those trees, because it's that will give you the nice clear-cut separation. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's put the first part of the water on. But what we'll do there is give that a couple of seconds to dry off. While that is drying off, what we'll do is we will have a little bit of a clean of the old palette. So this is a nice matte textured plastic here. I'm just going to use water and just give it a coat here. You can use exactly the same water. Got some kitchen paper, paper towel, and it cleans up nice. It's a nice little thing. You can be more precise than me with your cleaning. After 30 years of painting, you get a bit lazy with cleaning your palettes. Let's do the water. Let's do the water. What we'll do here is we'll take the blue. Bags of water. Bags of water. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful, watery blue. Love it. Similar to what we did for the sky. And what we'll do here is we'll paint the water in 3 sections. So we'll paint the top section, the waterfall, and then the bottom section. And the waterfall kind of comes in here, where this curved line is. You can decide where this is. And we'll start off by painting across the top edge of the waterfall. And then working back. Notice I've not done a straight line, a bit sort of leaning down a bit, popping a few random lines above that, and then clean your brush. Clean your brush, and as always, a couple of quick taps on the tissue. And then just put your brush in that blue and wriggle it around. It's important not to be too dry with your brush. Start to pull. Can you see those lines? Starting to pull them out. Very loosely at this point, dragging down. Can we see those flow lines? Use this curve here as your reference. Do as many of these as you like. Eventually it'll stop working because the paint will dry, but don't worry, because we're going to add most of those with actual paint. But it's a good time to do a few. And if it's not working for you, try cleaning the brush, giving it a few taps, 3 or 4 taps, as opposed to 2 taps, and dragging it out. It starts to give a little bit of movement there. It's just a starting point, that's all. Then we'll come back to the palette, folks, and we'll paint in the bottom section of the water. There's just a touch of this on show, so it works nice here. So we'll grab, again, from the palette, we've got the blue here. Look, if your paint's a bit dry, add water. If the spots of colour are really, really hard and dry, a little bit of boiling water, being very careful, obviously, just to pop a few spots on it, leave it 10 minutes, and the paint will always come back and is perfectly usable. So imagine the bottom of the water here. Notice the angle, what I've done. So I'm sort of pointing down from here towards the base. Fill in about half of it. Clean your brush. How many taps do you want? You want your 2 taps. And then use water to fill the space. Now let's do a similar thing. Let's do some of the lines coming up. Just a few. All the time following the curve. Notice I'm holding the brush like a pencil right at the tip. So that's given me my 3 clear sections. It's time for more detail. Right at the bottom of a waterfall, where it crashes into the flowing river, you get little spots and dots. Well, you can, with a damp brush, you can just lightly tap it and spot it. Just give it some little tiny dots and dabs around, little spots, and it takes the harsh line away. Okay. We'll come back to the blue here. There it is. Again on the tissue. So if you dab off the excess colour on some tissue, it just gives you that little bit more control over your brush. So you've got a semi-dry brush, okay, which is good for detail. Detail means you're holding your brush right near the tip. You can see that. Hold it near the brush and think the top section of water to be quite horizontal. Add horizontal lines. Once it's dry, if yours is not dry, give it a dry, leave it, pause the video, leave it, and then start to come down into the waterfall. Like so. Start to get the movement. Try and be quite quick with the movement as well. Try and be free. Pick up more colour if you need to. On the tissue, 4 or 5 times. It just gives a drier brush effect. Get these right into the corner. And start to get movement. So from horizontal lines above the water into coming over the edge. So, and the quicker you paint water, ripples movement, the more it looks like it's moving. Like below here, the waterfall in the foreground. Again, it's the paint, it's on the tissue. Add in a few little horizontal, but more sort of loosely done, smaller little horizontal lines, or give more of the impression of movement. So you can see it's got a bit more activity to it. So at the minute, we've got a very simple looking river. Basically, it's just all one colour, it's blue, but we'd expect to see more colours in there. We'd expect to see some green reflections. We'd expect to see some light, which we'll do right at the end. And we'd also expect to see some shadows in that water as well. So that is a good time to break, come down to the palette and add some new colours. So, we spoke about grey previously. Let's mix up grey. Quite strong, don't be afraid. Plenty of blue, really dig in that blob of blue. Good strong bit of grey. So how do you make grey again? Well, if you're mixing it from a fresh, put the blue, put the red, so you get that slight purple. Can you see how the colour goes a little bit towards the purple? I'm adding tiny bits of red. Less is more. And then you bring in the orange, little bits of orange, and you'll see that colour, every time you add a bit more orange, gets that little bit darker. You can see the colour getting lovely and dark there. Beautiful bit of shadow colour. So all 3 colours together make grey. Perfect, crisp, dark colour. Rotate the brush through the palette as well, through your fingers, through the palette, like this. And you get a nice point out of your brush. So you can see you've got that nice kind of pointy brush here. And then we can really do a lot with this colour. Again, we can darken the edge of the water a little bit. Make sure this is a good strong bit of colour. You can make sure this comes up into the rocks or the grassy area. You can add some little horizontal lines reflecting this in the edge. So your little horizontal flicks, it kind of attaches itself to it. Always remember that good little tip is just to give it a bit of a tap on tissue, and it gives you much more control over this. If you want to impress your neighbour with this picture, what you could do is reflect the waterfall. Having a look around this area here, you can really see how you can reflect going the opposite way, but notice it's following the curve, but notice it's made up of little horizontal lines, okay? And then just a few around the base of the water, like so. And then some coming over the top of the waterfall. So from a horizontal into a curve. Be quite free with them. Don't be too slow at painting them in. And the reason for that is because it just looks more natural, more like movement in water, which is good. You can't beat a bit of movement in water. It's healthy, apparently. Bring it in. So you can add these little horizontal lines. Beautiful way of capturing water. Keep making sure that these are nice and dark on the edges as well. Really comes alive when you bring shadows in. Have a go at painting some trees, some dark tree branches with this colour. You've got a nice brush here. This brush I'm using, if you look at it, you can see it's very pointy. And you remember I mentioned twisting the brush through the actual palette. That will twist the tip of the brush. But if you do that same thing through the kitchen paper, twist the tip, you get a beautiful point, and then you can have a go. Now this is one of the occasions where you think about rotating your board as well. For me, stood up here, I want to turn the board that way, beautiful, and then I want to basically hold this thing like a pencil. You hold the brush here, whereas a pencil you hold here. Draw with the brush, branch up. Let's bring these branches up and let's get the nice. Look how I'm looking close at the picture. A lovely tool. This worker brush I'm using here is absolutely stunning for doing this. I'm looking close. I've got my close-up glasses on. I don't even wear them, but you can really see how I can really get that nice fine branch out, paint them in the direction it grows. Look at that tree, albeit on the side. Keep picking up more colour. Don't forget that rotation effect. Let's add another branch here. This makes such a difference. Now, I want to stress the point, folks, of two things. Paint the branches in the direction they grow and have less paint on your brush. So if you remember what I said was pick the paint up, rotate the tip over the edge of the tissue. That's taking the colour off. And then actually a third one, hold your brush really close in, and you can produce some wonderful detailed brush strokes for getting these gorgeous, lovely branches. And of course here as well, anywhere that you want to pop in a few trees, we'll squeeze one on that side. Take your time, pause the video, take your time, enjoy the process, rotate the board to suit. If you watch any of my other live videos online, or if you attend one of my workshops at any point, you'll see me painting trees in all different directions, whatever makes it work at the end of the day. Looking good, folks, really happy with this. At this point, take a step back, have a look at the edge of the water. Is the banking nice and dark? If it isn't, you've got the colour. You've got the colour here, look, beautiful darkness. It's on your brush. Just make sure you've got that lovely dark edge to the river. Beautiful. And then the final colour for the picture is going to be some green. And what I'd like to do is add a little bit, a touch of reflection. Very little is needed, but just a little bit here, in my opinion. So let's come down to the palette. We'll take the orange. There's the orange. Not too strong here, so this is quite watery. And we'll take some of the blue, of course, and we'll mix it over the top of the orange. And you get green. Make sure that colour's diluted. Make sure it's nice and pale, which means you're adding water. I'm just sort of filling up the brush and giving it a tap on tissue. And then you're ready to paint in some reflections, which are few and far between, but just enough to capture some of the green in the water. So on this right side here, I feel I want to put a little bit of green there. I'll pick up a touch more colour at that point. Doesn't want a huge amount of this at all. Just a little bit of a horizontal sort of glaze coming in. It just helps to capture maybe a little bit there, but really not much. Beautiful, that's nice. Just adds a little bit of ripple, a little reflection. And the waterfall wants a little bit more movement in it as well. We've got the colour, it's this grey down here. So it's a bit dry, How do you refresh it? Add a spot of water and it's back in business, look. Have a practice at this technique, folks. Pick up the grey, wipe it off 3 or 4 times. Have a go at splaying the bristles. Let's have a look up here against the painting. You can really see how we can get nice and close in, and we can use the fingers to really get the bristles open. If there's too much paint on there, then bristles will not open, okay? So something to think about. And very simply, nice and close here, we can see lots of random incidental strokes. Can you see? It's like tyre tracks. In the past, I've called them skid marks, but you know what I mean. We'll not mention that. It just, you know, it's my mind. And what we'll do is we'll just bring these over and we'll get the movement there. And while we're doing this, folks, keep getting those bristles splayed. Have a little go at dropping in from the water's edge some subtle reflections. Can you see those? Really practice those. They're stunning, folks. What a simple thing. More tyre tracks, skid marks, and it just puts a nice downward reflection against the water. You could do some of those here as well. It's a simple effect, but you know, it always adds a bit of life to water. It really does. Loving this. What we're going to do to finish off with this, folks, is add a little bit of light to the water, okay? Now, light will be produced with a craft knife, so this is something to be careful of, obviously. Totally optional. It's entirely up to you, folks. The painting, as it is here, works without a craft knife, but if you've got something like this, a nice sharp knife, it does work really well for adding a little bit of light into the water and the waterfall. Literally hold it like a pen and use the point of the knife. What we'll do is we'll scrape off the paper. Now, please don't be afraid about doing this, because the watercolour paper is very, very thick, and it's just on the edge, and a few little bits coming over the water, but it works without it. You can even do a little bit of a scratch in the banking as well. Just a bit of a fine scrape, and it just puts a little bit of texture, a bit of light. It's a lovely effect. Horizontal scrapes in the water, following the curve. Look how it breaks the edge of the waterfall, that clean edge. It really works nice. If you've not got a craft knife, if you don't want to use one, and obviously please do be very careful with this. The other way to put light in is to simply clean the brush, use your fingers to cup the brush so it goes all nice and pointy, like so. But it's damp, it's damp. And in the banking here, you can wash away colour. So you can paint some lighter lines on the top of the bankings, and then with a bit of dry tissue, you can press it. And can you see, it takes a little bit of light out, and it's effective. It's effective. It's not harming the paper, but it adds more contours, more texture to your watercolour picture. One last thing to do, folks, and that would be to grab one of these mounts and pop the mount on the picture. It always makes such a lovely difference to frame the pictures. The magic mounts, I like to call these, because they really do set the scene off. And there we go. Using 3 colours, the orange, the blue, the red, we've created a beautiful watercolour summer's day evening with a beautiful flowing waterfall. I really enjoyed that, folks, and you've had a go. If not, give it a go, paint along. You can't go wrong, enjoy it, keep the paint flowing. And I'll see you next time for more watercolour painting on the Craft Store.